Misphonia brought the faders up now. She's a military grade in Dolby Surround, around 5.1. Cue the barking from the baritone conductor in the pit for the car honk duet. Halftone harmony from the sewer. Rebel youth choir belt phrases even newer. Dump truck man drops a beat with trash cans. Call 911, we got therapy demands. Philharmonic got a first chair car crash and the falsetto to smash the glass. It's a drive-by lullaby that couldn't get worse. A melody abandoned in the key of New York, where nothing comes after. I'm a pastime streamer hanging from the rafters. I don't get out, I don't have fun, living like a captive of the sun.
So I gotta put my shades on, riding through the city as I get my Escalade on, flipping down the streets that my reputation was made on. King of the city, the man finna put a parade on. Drop the confetti from off the rooftop, while I come down candy and let my roof drop. I got a daddy shotgun in a tube top, with some Daisy Dukes on and some tube socks, listening to Tupac. You ain't know I do rock records, I do it all. I got my hands in some cooking joints, you ain't do it all. I took a chance and threw caution up in the wind, cause I got nothing to lose but got something to win. We throw it up against the wall and see if it sticks. It's gonna end up being a bomb or being the shit.
bounce off. Skull-shaking cadence of the J-train rolls. Rhythm of defeat, repeating like a pulse. Marching on its static, lyric shout a retort to the melody abandoned in the key of New York. Where nothing comes after, I'm a pastime streamer, hanging from the rafters. I don't get out, I don't have fun, living like a captive of the sun.
Malcolm X never lived to see the government fall, but the state he opposed made him a stamp. Maybe that's the best you can hope for if you never give up. Your enemies will teach your courts to dance, and you and me, buddy, been living for a ghost. We ain't been sticking our heads in the sand. So when I'm afraid, take me by the hand, show the world that we can't be planned. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. Catch me smashing my own windows when I'm feeling nuts. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. I've been lying on the floor alone and unwashed, without enough courage to brush my teeth. I'm afraid of the red that will pour out my gums and bleed me to death in my sleep. I've been staying inside with the curtains down, ignoring what phone calls I get. So when I come out, take me by the hand and show the world a fight it won't forget. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked. Catch me smashing my own windows when I'm feeling nuts. It's alright, it's okay, it's just that everything's fucked.
How's that? You don't hear me now? Okay. I don't know what happened. um yeah, okay. I don't know what happened there. But we're going to go into research mode right now. So what I'd like to infer to all of you is 1 week from today, live on twitch.tv, 6 p.m. Eastern, I'm debating another streamer, Bastiat, I think is his name, about socialism versus like capitalism, and specifically we're going to be talking about like how socialism functions within democratic institutions, and I think he specifically mentioned like workplace democracy and how that actually functions. So we're going to do some research and preparation for that, just to take it seriously. I feel pretty confident about like the like arguments, like say the moral argument in favor of workplace democracy. What I want to get into really is like ideally we're going to be looking at like case studies of like how this actually works and get like a really like in-depth nuts and bolts understanding in preparation for the debate I'm having next week. But let me catch up on chat before we get started, because there have been a lot of people sending a lot of messages and I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you. I've got 9 viewers. Holy shit. I think some of you are new. Sepulche, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, 13. Had a conversation. They've read the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, also The Conquest of Bread, but I'm still a hardcore capitalist. We can talk later about that, actually. I'm down to have a conversation with you about that. Right now I'm going to be focused on research, and I'm going to be ending my stream at probably in about 2 hours, because I've got to go meet someone for dinner. But yeah, how about I might stream again after I get back home, or I'll stream again tomorrow and we can talk then, Sepulche. If you wanna have a conversation about like capitalism versus socialism. Let me catch up real quick. Concord 990, communist does research? That can't be quite true, otherwise he'd not be a commie, lol. LOL indeed. LOL. Sorry, I'm just trying to get caught up real quick. Jim Proton, how's it going? It's going alright, Preston. Drag me to hell. I'd help, but I've been up for like 20 hours. I'm sorry to hear that, Hillbilly. Hopefully you fix your shit. If you allow me to change rooms first, I'm willing to help. Discord audio is better than Twitch for me. Yo main though. Yo Magan though. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong as well. Yeah, I think I've seen you once or twice around Yo Magantho and other people's streams, but I like when doing this research thing, I think I function a little bit better if it's like someone I already know who I'm working with. But I do really appreciate the offer, even if I'd prefer to like keep it to like people who I already have like a relationship with, I'm already more familiar with. But yeah, thank you so much for the offer. I do really appreciate that, even though I'm not taking that up. Dang it, Monk, stop being so cute. Thank you, Posebud. Oh no, you're muted. I'm muted. Oh heck yeah, Holding Crew is here. Lots of hearts, lots of howdies. You're a leftist, will you eat dinner? Left wing destroyed. I eat pieces of shit like me for dinner. Very good, very good. Will you eat for dinner? I'm actually not certain. I just know I'm gonna be hanging out with my dad, but I don't know what is actually happening. Alrighty, we got 10 people here. Let's get fucking rolling. So what we're focusing on is we've got this research document, right? And what we're going to do is we've got 4 topics, like general democracy, workplace democracy, democratic organization, transitioning to socialism. The idea is that, so when we're talking about like these topics in the context of a debate, right? When having like a conversation about like socialism versus liberalism, or socialism versus capitalism, or communism versus liberal, whatever language you want to use, right? It becomes very easy to accidentally have a conversation about 2 things at once, right? So you need to make sure that if you're actually interested in having a productive conversation, no matter which side you're actually approaching this from, what you need to do is you need to like think through things and think about which conclusions am I reaching from this particular topic. Are the conclusions of these 2 topics related, right? So like if we're talking about like the methods by which we transition from capitalism to socialism, that's a question that needs to be asked, but it's not necessarily that's not necessarily directly related to the idea of what are the nuts and bolts reality of organizing in workplace democracy, right? There are definitely links between the 2, but the conclusion of one is not necessarily going to have much of a bearing on the conclusion of the other. So we've just got different topics here just so that we can sort of like be a little bit more organized, and we have like an idea of like what we can refer back to. Y'all gonna have a moderator or nah? I don't think so. This is not like a huge deal. Griff, how are you doing? Average dad and large son night, nice. Alrighty, so what we're just doing right now is we're just starting at like the basics. I'm looking at libcom.org and the anarchistlibrary.org about because I want to find like what these sites have to say about like what we're really looking for right now, that I think I like am gonna need the most knowledge on in this debate, is like nuts and bolts case studies about how this stuff works. I don't know if we're gonna find it on either of these 2 sites. Hopefully, maybe we'll have to like do some like we'll have to look for like some like actual academic paper. But accepted a job offer at 17 hours scheduling hospital appointments in a call center, so that's cool. Oh shit, yeah. Nice, Griff. It's good to hear. I don't think this is necessarily dimensions of radical political emancipation. This sounds promising. As citations. What are these like citations for? What I want is like I want case studies for like anti-capitalist democratic organization. So let's see if this actually like, even if this like article doesn't have it, if it has like a citation for it, that's what we're looking for. Finally, we'll be able to get my car running and maybe upgrade to something that doesn't require a desk fan to cool the CPU. Yeah, maybe that's probably the ideal, right? political emancipation in the most authentic and democratic sense of the term. It means emancipation from the specialization of politics. In other words, it is a project of direct democracy with society, not some extra social source. Self-institutes its form and self-limits its activity. The seeds of such political emancipation be trusted. Okay. Paris Commune. May 68. But also, when was this published? Oh, 2019. Okay. They're talking about vanguardism. I don't necessarily. This might be interesting, but this might be relevant for like democratic processes and transitioning to socialism. But this isn't what I'm looking for like right now, which is like a case study or something. My laptop off the desk with books and have a fan pointed directly where the CPU is. Jeezy crazy. That's gnarly. It was a creation of genuine public space and time during the Paris Commune. She refutes the role of industrial proletariat as a sole actor of social change. There's also a significant role played by semi-skilled peasants who have migrated from provinces to work in the city, as well as by traditional artisans that were located at the bottom of the artistic hierarchy at the time. Reminds us that women are also present in the Paris Commune in a very dynamic way, that women are the first to act. They didn't wait, okay. Each of those groups transgressed their bureaucratic roles and acted instead of citizens as political beings that are capable of democratically determining the future. With these cases, the target of the popular rebellions was not only industrial capitalism, but the symbols of bureaucratization and policing of everyday life that stagnated spatiality and temporality. What was revolutionary about them was that people chose to transgress their heteronomously determined roles and acted instead as citizens or created public space at the time. Griff is the most incredible cinema you'll ever hear about. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, but also should probably... it's probably not ideal. One important characteristic of popular uprisings is the effort of those below. Okay. I want to like see how these like democratic institutions function. That's really what I'm focusing on right here. I'm thinking that this is not necessarily relevant. Sadistic and get off on making people wait in raids for my screen to load. Remember correctly, the work Latin American social movements and a New Left Consensus, State and Civil Society Challenges to Neoliberal Globalization by Jennifer Disney and Virginia Williams covers horizontal organization trends in Latin America against capitalism, particularly regarding the Zapatistas. Yeah, let me get a notepad real quick so I can have like a place to put this down. So I'll just copy it from here. That's easier than typing it out. Alrighty. So we'll keep this in mind. I hate that. I want to shake things without everything going away. I need to disable that. I don't know how to do that, though. Fuck. Alrighty, I think that's figured out. Do you know, is this like a, source, is this like a book or is this like an article? Because I don't really mind like reading something bigger than like an article, but on stream that gets a little bit challenging. Let me. This is like a academic source. Well, she explores the shift to the left in Latin America within the context of understanding power relations among, within, and between social movements in the state. We examined the emergence and development of social movement resistance to neoliberal globalization in Latin America over the past 2 decades, as well as how charismatic leaders of the left have captured state power. During an analysis of the Zapatista and Apista movements in Mexico, the Piqueteros and workers' movements in Argentina, the Chavistas in Venezuela, and the Aymara coca growers and indigenous movements in Bolivia, as well as an examination of presidential behavior and state power in these countries. This article describes and enumerates the alternative models of power in use in Latin America today, arguing that a combination of strategies working both with and autonomously from the state works best to achieve leftist ends. Social movements associated with a shift to the left in Latin America today are adopting not one, but a combination of approaches or meshworks in relation to the state and capital. They seem to fall within two general patterns. Number one, reformist and autonomous approaches toward the state and capital. And number two, autonomous and evolutionary approaches towards the state and capital. This article is an interpretive analysis of the dialectical relationship between social movement and state power in Latin America. Okay. Let me find this. Can I, oh, I need, like... Yeah, this is... Unfortunately, I'm not gonna pay $43 to access this. Let me see if I can find it on another source. This... No, this. Is this the same? This is a different article. Right? The new politics of social movements versus... yeah, okay, so this is a different article, but this is maybe also relevant. Yeah, I don't think I'll have a problem accessing these off stream. PDFslide.net. Alrighty. I know that mutual aid and fields, factories, and workplace by Kropotkin covers organizational habits to some degree, as well as various work by Murray Bookchin from an anarchistic perspective. My own research tries to synergize those authors of Marxism. Are you doing like your post-grad work, or is this like what perspective are you doing your own research from? Because that's actually really interesting to me. Because like the idea of like Marx synergies between like Marxist thought and anarchist organizing that's something that I without as much of an understanding of theory as I probably should have, that's something that's just intuitively appealing to me. So it's interesting seeing people do research on that. Let's see if I can find like the relevant passage from mutual aid. Wrapped up my master's and I'm taking a year before moving into a PhD program. I'm actually an Africanist, so I do a fair bit of work regarding concepts of citizenships. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. Let's see if we can find like the like a relevant passage. Relate among animals, among savages. Okay, you can tell this was written in 1902. Historic examples maybe are interesting, but I don't know if I think if I was going to like read like historical examples of direct democracy in like indigenous populations, I think I would want to read it from like an indigenous perspective rather than Kropotkin. My non-theoretical work overwhelmingly deals with democratization, ethnic politics, and environmental politics in sub-Saharan Africa. That's really interesting to me. Yeah, I honestly wish I knew more theory than I did. For me, it's like I feel uncomfortable reading theory and drawing like conclusions from it, because like when I read like academic work, I'm always like maybe a little bit self-conscious about my ability to properly analyze it and place it within the context of like the canon of academic work at the time, which I think is like a necessary framework for like understanding these things properly. So I don't read as much theory as I probably should, just because I'm self-conscious about my ability to properly understand it. But the only way to properly understand it is to read it, right? So Let's see. I don't want continued. Why did I do that? Mutual aid amongst ourselves. Let's see this. Mutual aid tendency in man is so remote in origin and is so deeply interwoven with all past evolution of the human race, it has been maintained by mankind up to the present time, notwithstanding all vicissitudes of history. Chiefly evolved during periods of peace and prosperity, but when even the greatest calamities befell men, when whole countries were laid waste by wars and whole populations decimated by misery or prone to tyranny, the same tendency continued to live in the villages among the poorer classes in the towns. It still kept them together, and in the long run it reacted even upon those ruling, fighting, and devastating minorities, which dismissed it as sentimental nonsense. Whenever mankind had to work out a new social organization, adapted to the new phase of development, its constructive genius always drew the elements and inspiration for the new departure from that same ever-living tendency. I fully understand that, however, one thing you can do to look to theory is also to look at the development since then and work your way backwards. A friend of mine who studies queer political theory for his PhD program taught me that. Yeah, that is an interesting idea to like work backwards. I mean, really, the only way to learn it is to like invest a ton of time into doing it, and I need to do that. Like, there's no real work around that. I just it's harder to get started, I think, than it is to like build those connections than it is to like actually like the beginning is the hardest part from what I've seen, when you're like starting out and you don't necessarily know everything that you need to know, and you don't know what you don't know that you need to know. Yeah, I don't know, but the only way to actually learn it is still like to read it. It is hard. I feel like ass if I take too long on break. I still encourage you and everyone else. Yeah, I definitely am going to work on it. I actually am planning on. So I have like most of a bachelor's degree in information technology from I got this by taking dual credit courses in community college when I was in high school, and then I went off to college, like a very tech focused college, to get like an IT degree with like specialization in cybersecurity, and I was going to go work for the NSA to piss off my mom, who was also an anarchist. And then I had like a really bad depressive episode, and then I got more into politics, and from there I realized that I actually don't want to work for the NSA. So I'm thinking about I ended up having to drop out towards the end of my I think I had like 3/4 of the degree, and I had to drop out because I had that depressive episode and I couldn't catch back up with my work. But when I go back to school, I'm honestly thinking of switching to philosophy, because having the tools to like properly understand and analyze these things is really important to me. Like, just I can't get myself to care as much about making money and doing terrible things to do that as I can to like actually understand like these sorts of theories of social organization that I think are tremendously important. So I think when I go back to school, that's what I'm going to be focusing on. But that's the future. Right now, we're focusing on this debate. Same tendency continue to live in the villages among the poor classes of town. Sorry about the depressive episode. It sucks. I hear you. I started as a pre-med biology major, became a poli-sci biology double major at the French minor, then dropped bio my last year. Yeah. I mean, I feel pretty good about my my position for getting an education right now. I feel like I've got a plan, and as long as I stick with that, I'll get my degree. But oh well. What happened, and I'd be a different person if it didn't happen. And I'd probably be a worse person if it didn't happen. So I'm not gonna say it was a good thing, but you know what? I'm fine with how things turned out. Okay. Mutual aid tendency in man is so remote in origin. Okay. Dropped out of 2 different grad programs, both due to depression. The struggle is so real. And or real. Become a pro gamer. See, that was my manic episode, Hillbilly. Is when I maxed out a credit card to buy pro gamer gear to become a pro gamer. that was when that happened. I think that's behind me as well. How much did you drop on G Fuel? Oh, everything. It was all G Fuel. Alright. All countries are laden at least by wars, and the whole population were decimated by misery or groaned under the yoke of tyranny. The same tendency continued to live in the villages and among the poorer classes in the town. It still kept them together, and in the long run it reacted even upon those ruling, fighting, and devastating minorities, which dismissed it as sentimental nonsense. Whenever mankind had to work out a new social organization, adapted to a new phase of development, its constructive genius always drew the elements and inspiration for the new departure from the same ever-living tendency. We're talking about the tendency, like the historical tendency for people to engage in mutual aid. New economical and social institutions, insofar as they were a creation of the masses, new ethical systems and new religions, all have originated from the same source, and the ethical progress of our race, viewed in its broad lines, appears as a gradual extension of the mutual aid principles from the tribe to always larger and larger agglomerations, so as to finally embrace one day the whole of mankind, without respect to its diverse creeds, languages, and races. Okay. Look, left fam, I'm old as hell, gave up on going back for additional education after my undergrad to survive capitalism. Do your best if schooling is what you want, but be kind to yourself. It's hard to do school when capitalism forces you to work until you die. Love you all. Claims to be a pro gamer, isn't even an active participant on white nationalist Discord channels. Yeah, Pose, but I actually feel really lucky in terms of my degree, because going back to school, I'm in a position where hopefully, if everything works out and nothing blows up in my face, I'll get paid to work on my undergrad. Because I'll have my tuition covered and I'll have other scholarship I can apply for, and I'll be like, the money I'm getting would go towards like living expenses, but it would still be really nice. really, really nice. After having passed through the Savage tribe, yeah, this is this is like, I get it's a product of its time, but it's really hard for me to read passages like this and not like just wince a little bit. Having passed through the Savage tribe and next to the village community of Europeans who came to work out in medieval times a new form of organization which had the advantage of allowing great latitude for individual initiative, while it largely responded at the same time to man's need of mutual support. A federation of village communities, covered by a network of guilds and fraternities, was called into existence in the medieval cities. The immense results achieved under this new form of union and well-being for all in industries, art, science, and commerce were discussed at some length in the two preceding chapters, and an attempt was made to show why, towards the end of the 15th century, the medieval republics, surrounded by the domains of hostile feudal lords, were doomed to become prey to the growing military states. Okay, well that's interesting, but it's not relevant to like the specific topic we're researching, so I'm glad that we skipped that. However, before submitting for 3 centuries to come to the all-absorbing authority of the state, the masses of the people made a formidable attempt at reconstructing society on the old basis of mutual aid and support. It is well known by this time that the great movement of the Reform was not a mere revolt against the abuses of the Catholic Church. It had its constructive ideal as well, and that ideal was life in free, brotherly communities. Those are the early writings and sermons of the periods which found most responsive with the masses were imbued with the ideas of the economical and social brotherhood of mankind. What's happening? I'm really important. How are you? The 12 articles and similar professions of faith, which were circulated among the German and Swiss peasants and artisans, maintained not only everyone's right to interpret the Bible according to his own understanding, but also included the demand of communal lands being restored to village communities and feudal servitudes being abolished, and they always alluded to the true faith, a faith of brotherhood. At the same time, just gotta take a sip from this gigantic jug. One of the issues I have with Kropotkin's work, as much as I love them, is you can really tell how his family's princely military tradition had influenced his thoughts. Yeah, I'm sort of getting that. Like, again, I don't have the... Because I'm aware of the existence of, like, egalitarian movements and anti-colonial movements at like, when was this published? 1902. 1902. Got it. I'm aware of the existence of groups that would criticize the use of language like the savage tribe that existed at the time. I don't know how much, like, for lack of a better word, clout those groups had, especially that if Kropotkin was able to expose himself to those. I don't know. It's really hard for me to say that, oh, this racist language is just a product of its time, because I don't think that excuses it. That's an impressive amount of water. Yeah, I try to I try to fucking OJ jug. Yeah, it's a lemonade jug actually, but I took the markers of it off. I don't know. I do enjoy Kropotkin, but yeah, any sort of, like, a lot of like theory written around this time has the same same sort of language that I really take objection to. But I'm not going to throw the whole thing out because it's got some bad words in it. Even though those bad words need to be analyzed and like actually critiqued, but not by me. I don't have the theoretical framework to like properly critique this. We're submitting for 3 centuries to come to the old. Okay. This is about the Reformation. Next 3 centuries, the states, both on the continent and these islands, systematically weeded out all institutions in which the mutual aid tendency had formerly found its expression. The village communities were bereft of their folkmotes, their courts and independent administration, their lands were confiscated, guilds were spoliated of their possessions and liberties and placed under control, the fancy and the bribery of the state's official. The cities were divested of their sovereignty and the very springs of their inner life. The folkmote, the elect justices and administration, the sovereign parish, and the sovereign guild were annihilated. The state's functionary took possession of every link of what formerly was an organic whole. Under that fatal policy and the wars it engendered, whole regions, once populous and wealthy, were laid bare. Rich cities became insignificant boroughs. The very roads which connected them with other cities became impracticable. Industry, art, and knowledge fell into decay. Political education, science, and the law were rendered subservient to the idea of state centralization. It was taught in the universities from the pulpit that the institutions which men formerly used to embody their needs of mutual support could not be tolerated in a properly organized state, that the state alone could represent the bonds of unions between its subjects. Federalism and particularism were the enemies of progress, and the state was the only proper initiator of further development. By the end of the last century, the kings on the continent, the parliament in these isles, and the Revolutionary Convention of France, they were at war with each other, agreed in asserting that no separate unions between citizens must exist within the state, that hard labor and death were the only suitable punishments to workers who dared to enter into coalitions. I got pizza for this? Nice. No state within the state. The state alone and the state's church must take care of matters of general interest, while the subjects must represent loose aggregations of individuals, connected by no particular bonds, bound to appeal to the government each time they felt a common need. That they feel a common need. Up to the middle of this century, this was the theory and practice in Europe. Even commercial and industrial societies were looked at with suspicion. As to the workers, their unions were treated as unlawful almost within our own lifetime in this country. In the last 20 years on the continent, the whole system of our state education was such that up to the present time, even in this country, a notable portion of society would be treated as a revolutionary measure. The concession of such rights is everyone. Free men are served 500 years ago in the village folkmote, the guild, the parish, and the city. Okay. The absorption of all social functions by the state necessarily favored the development of unbridled, narrow-minded individualism. In proportion as the obligations towards the state grew in numbers, citizens were evidently relieved from their obligations towards each other. And barbarian society. See, I don't know. I'm not going to be able to read this and not wince. Like, even though it's like a product of its time or whatever, you can treat the text as a whole with whatever value it has. I'm not going to be able to read passages like this and not wince. Sorry. Scandalous to eat without having loudly called out thrice whether or not there's some. Okay. I'm trying to look for like fully understand through that. I just gritted my teeth and bared it while reading this work. Yeah. I'm not gonna bear it, but I'm gonna just move past it. I'm trying to see if this is like because I'm looking for, I might be reading the wrong passage from this. Because all of this is like interesting and helpful. But I need to make sure that it's directly relevant to the idea of like democratic institutions. Although like communalization is still like a form of democracy, so sprinkled throughout his work. I initially meant it as an off-stream thing. I didn't expect. Oh, okay. You didn't think of this? Okay. I might read this off-stream then, if this is like too dense to read on stream. Yeah, there is a lot of this. You don't have to apologize for that though. It is interesting reading about this more. Let me see if I can. I do want to make sure that I'm. Let's just look for Yeah, it's a sharp but extremely dense work. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to properly like actually like absorb it if I'm reading that out loud to people. I don't know. Maybe I should get over myself. Let me see if I can find like direct democracy case study. See what we can do. I don't know if this is not gonna like have it. Economic voting and direct democracy. Campaigning and direct democracy, I don't care. Okay, let me find authoritarian and democratic techniques. What about this? Sierra of Herbert Spencer, whose dichotomy of societies of barbarian and civilized. I'm not excusing it, of course. Punk ass social Darwinism. Yeah, it's social Darwinism at worst, and at best, it's like an outdated, like very like modernist view of history, where there's a linear progression of human advancement, and yeah. So I feel like it's an idea that's worth critique, but like like those like actual like sorts of like the language and the mindset leading up to that language in Kropotkin's work is worthy of critique, as it is when it's present in the work of a lot of other like European philosophers or political theorists in that era. But I am not qualified to critique it. Will also like I'm not qualified to critique how that affects the work. Will also what we can take away from the work, regardless of that. Eurocentric BS, yeah. Democracy is a term now confused and sophisticated by indiscriminate use, and often treated with patronizing contempt. Can we agree, no matter how far we might diverge at a later point, the final principle of democracy is to place what is common to all men above that which any organization, institution, or group might claim for itself? This is not to deny the claims of superior natural endowment, specialized knowledge, technical skill, or institutional organization. All these may, by democratic permission, play a useful role in the human economy, but democracy consists in giving a final authority to the whole rather than the part, and only living beings as such are an authentic expression of the whole, whether acting alone or with the help of others. Around the central principle clusters a group of related ideas and practices with a long foreground in history, though they are not always present or present in equal amounts in all societies. Among these items are communal self-government, free communication as between equals, unimpeded access to the common store of knowledge, protection against arbitrary external controls, and a sense of individual moral responsibility for behavior that affects the whole community. All living organisms are in some degree autonomous in that they follow a life pattern of their own, but in man, this autonomy is an essential condition for his further development. We surrender some of our autonomy when ill or crippled, but to surrender it every day on every occasion would be to turn life itself into a chronic illness. The best life possible, and here I am consciously treading on contested ground, is one that calls for an ever greater degree of self-direction, self-expression, self-realization. In this sense, personality, once the exclusive attribute of kings, belongs on a democratic theory that to every man. Life itself in its fullness and wholeness cannot be delegated. Okay. When was this published? 1964. Okay. You can still tell. You can sort of tell by the language. Like this is we've moved past 1902 where we're not calling people savages or barbarians. But I don't know. I did wince reading this part. I'm just going to wince no matter what happens reading anything ever. How's it going? It's going all right. How are you doing, Joseph? In framing this provisional definition, I trust that I have not, for the sake of agreement, left out anything important. Democracy in the primal sense I shall use the term is necessarily most visible in relatively small communities and groups whose members meet frequently face to face, interact freely, and are known to each other as persons. As soon as large numbers are involved, democratic association must be supplemented by a more abstract, depersonalized form. Historic experience shows that it's much easier to wipe out democracy by an institutional arrangement that gives authority only to those at the apex of the social hierarchy than it is to incorporate democratic practices into a well-organized system under centralized direction. It achieves the highest degree of mechanical efficiency when those who work it have no mind or purpose of their own. That's interesting. Monk has winced 5 times, or 7 times. Yeah. The tension between small-scale association and large-scale organization, between personal autonomy and institutional regulation, between remote control and diffused local intervention has now created a critical situation. If our eyes had been open, we might long ago have discovered this conflict deeply embedded in technology itself. It is possible to characterize technics without as much hope of getting assent. Which, with whatever quizzical reserves you may still have, as in this description of democracy, but the very title of this paper is I confess a controversial one, and I cannot go far in my analysis of drawing on interpretations that have not yet been adequately published, still less widely discussed or rigorously criticized and evaluated. My thesis, to put it bluntly, is that from late Neolithic times in the Near East right down to our own day, 2 technologies have currently existed side by side, one authoritarian, the other democratic. The first system-centered, immensely powerful but inherently unstable. The other man-centered, relatively weak but resourceful and durable. If I am right, we are now rapidly approaching a point at which, unless we radically alter our present course, our surviving democratic techniques will be completely suppressed or supplanted, so that every residual autonomy will be wiped out or will be permitted only as a playful device of government, like national balloting for already chosen leaders in totalitarian countries. I mean, looking at this election, it's the data on which this thesis is based is familiar, but their significance has, I believe, been overlooked. What I would call democratic techniques is a small-scale method of production, resting mainly on human skill and animal energy, but always, even when employing machines, remaining under the active direction of the craftsman or the farmer, each group developing its own gifts through appropriate arts and social ceremonies, as well as making discreet use of the gifts of nature. A much easier read than Kropotkin. Is much more contemporary as Bookchin's The Ecology of Freedom, but that is a full book and is largely centered on left anarchistic environmentalism. Yeah, Bookchin is someone who I definitely need to read. Let's keep Do not misunderstand this analysis. The danger to democracy does not spring from any specific scientific discoveries or electronic inventions. The human compulsions that dominate the authoritarian techniques of our own day date back to a period before even the wheel had been invented. The danger springs from the fact that since Francis Bacon and Galileo defined the new methods and objectives, the techniques are great physical transformations, but affected by a system that deliberately eliminates a whole human personality, ignores the historic process, overplays the role of abstract intelligence, and makes control over physical nature, ultimately control over man itself, the chief purpose of existence. This is interesting, but it's not relevant. I don't know if I entirely agree as well, but it's not relevant. What about this? Malatesta? Malatesta is like theory, right? Like I don't know much. I've heard the name. I don't know much about Malatesta specifically. Who is this? Italian anarchist. Okay. Which author and work was that? Let me go back and the last one was go back and find it real quick. I had it. Thank you. I'm trying to keep up as best as possible. Yeah, I had Authoritarian and Democratic Techniques by Lewis Mumford. This is like an MPrim paper, I think, but so I don't know if I agree with it, and I don't know if it's I feel agree and disagree is sort of like there's sort of like shallow statements, I think, for theory, especially when like I didn't read the whole thing. I ducked out of this one midway through because it didn't actually seem to be relevant to what I was looking for. Malatesta is an Arcopac's favorite anarchist theorist. All right, let's look at this. Theoretically, democracy means popular government, by all, for everybody, by the efforts of all. In a democracy, the people must be able to say what they want, to nominate the executors of their wishes, to monitor their performance, and remove them when they see fit. Naturally, this presumes that all the individuals that make up a people are able to form an opinion and express it on all the subjects that interest them. It implies that everyone is politically and economically independent, and therefore no one to live would be obliged to submit to the will of others. Classes and individuals exist that are deprived of the means of production and therefore dependent on others with a monopoly over those means. One of the ways to learn is to read theory you disagree with, because it helps create a discourse to help you critically analyze your beliefs. That's true, and I don't have a problem with reading things I disagree with. The big problem with it is just that it's not specifically relevant to the discussion of like what specifically do democratic institutions and socialism look like. So I dipped out because I've got a limited amount of time right now and it's not strictly relevant. But yeah, that is true that I like. That's why I mentioned that I like agree or disagree is sort of like a not really a extremely helpful way to analyze like theoretical works, unless you're able to like actually put forward like a sustained critique of it. But the reason I dipped out just because it wasn't relevant. Democracy means popular government. It's like reading about pancakes when looking at how pie is made. Sure. Yeah, I actually like that. The democracy Naturalese presumes that all the individuals that make up a people are able to form an opinion and express it on all the subjects that interest them. It implies that everyone is politically and economically independent, and therefore no one to live would be obliged to submit to the will of others. If classes and individuals exist that are deprived of the means of production, and therefore dependent on others with monopoly over those means, the so-called democratic system can only be a lie, and one which serves to deceive the mass of the people and keep them docile with an outward show of sovereignty, while the rule of the privileged and dominant class is in fact salvaged and consolidated. Such is democracy, and such it always has been in a capitalist structure, whatever form it takes. Lucky Kicker says, hello, how are you? Lucky. So-called, okay. The rule of the privileged and dominant class is in fact salvaged, consolidated. Such is democracy, and such it always has been in a capitalist structure, whatever form it takes, from constitutional monarchy to so-called direct rule. There could be no such thing as a democracy, a government of the people, other than in a socialistic regime, when the means of production and of living are socialized, and the right of all to intervene in the running of public affairs is based on and guaranteed by the economic independence of every person. Thank you for the follow, Lucky. And I'm really important, and Yo Magan, though I'm guarantee I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm sorry. If you want to correct me on that, feel free. In this case, it would seem the democratic system. What are you doing? I'm doing some research for I'm going to be having a debate with another Twitch streamer next week, in about at 5 p.m. Central, so about exactly like 7 days from now, 7 days and 1 hour from now. And the debate is on socialism, forms of democracy under socialism. So a big part of that is going to be like researching what specifically these democratic institutions under socialism look for, and I've been sort of unsuccessfully doing that right now. So-called democratic system can only be a lie, and one which serves to deceive the masses of people and keep them docile with an outward show of sovereignty, while the rule of the privileged and dominant class is in fact salvaged and consolidated. There could be no such thing as a democracy, a government of the people, other than a socialistic regime, when the means of production of living are socialized and the right of all to intervene in the running of public affairs is based on and guaranteed by the economic independence of every person. In this case, it would seem that the democratic system was the one best able to guarantee justice and harmonize individual independence with the necessities of life and society. And so it seemed, more or less clearly, to those who, in an era of absolute monarchs, fought, suffered, and died for freedom. But for the fact that looking at these things as they really are, the government of all the people turns out to be an impossibility, owing to the fact that the individuals who make up the people have differing opinions and desires, and it never or almost never happens that in any one question or problem all can be in agreement. Therefore, the government of all the people, if we have to have government, can at best be only the government of the majority, and the Democrats, whether socialists or not, are willing to agree. They add, it is true that one must respect minority rights, but since it is the majority that decides what these rights are, as a result, minorities only have the right to do what the majority wants and allows. The only limit to the will of the majority would be the resistance to which the minorities know and can put up. This means that there would always be a social struggle in which a part of the members, albeit the majority, have the right to impose its own will on the others, yoking the efforts of all to their own ends. And here I would make an aside to show how, based on reasoning backed by the evidence of past and present events, it is not even true that where there is government, namely authority, that authority resides in the majority, and how in reality every democracy has been, is, and must be nothing short of an oligarchy, a government of the few, a dictatorship. But for the purpose of this article, I prefer to err on the side of the Democrats and assume that there can really be a true and sincere majority government. You have people say Yoma or Yomag. Kind of pronounced like Yo main, though. Okay. Are you going to go over the Soviets? I probably should do research into them. Yeah, that's probably a good idea to look more into like just any form of worker Soviets pre-consolidation of power. Yeah, that's probably something that's worth going into. It's tricky because so I'm I'm not a Marxist-Leninist, but I'm sympathetic to certain elements of Marxist-Leninist causes, namely like the Soviets' pre-consolidation of power. I think were at the very least a dramatic improvement over the Tsar, right? But biggest mistake of the Soviet Union up until Khrushchev is that they were never able to shake off war communism, right? And the only real reason I'm hesitant to like bring up like the Soviets in support of this is like if I'm talking to like a liberal American Democrat about this is what they did in the Soviet Union, right? I'm gonna get immediately bogged because this is where I'm a fucking dumbass when it comes to actually like reading this shit. But once I do understand something, rhetoric is what I would consider myself to be best at. Not I don't have any like unique special skill, but I can speak and I can arrange words in a somewhat persuasive way. But and I think from like that standpoint, when you're talking to like if I'm talking to like a liberal about forms of democracy I'd like to see in socialism, I'd really prefer not to get into the weeds of having to defend certain elements of the Soviet Union. And yes, the Holodomor was a horrible act, and yes, the purges were horrible, and yes, Stalin cracked down on all these people, but there are still these good things that happened that we can analyze from a critical perspective without necessarily supporting the bad. Like that's a whole path that I just puts me on the defensive in a way that's really, really bad when you're trying to like have like a public debate with someone. I second avoiding mentioning the Soviets unless you're confident you have an unavoidable need to. Yeah. Fair, Soviet is spooky. Yeah. And I mean, again, like I personally have like critical support of the Soviet Union, in some aspects at least. Those liberals are the worst. I'm opening a Marxist-Leninist, but I have quite a number of criticisms of the history of the ideology and how easy it is to attract tankies. As people, it is our duty to try to improve, but also our duty to call it terrible shit. Even Cuba is a safer minefield. I'm openly a Marxist-Leninist, but I have quite a number of criticisms of the history of ideology and how easy it is to, yeah. Even Cuba. Yeah, I feel really... I don't mind talking about Cuba. Like, Cuba, especially, like... Because with Cuba, it's easier to make the argument, like, with Cuba, it's easier to make a direct comparison between them and other, like, Central American post-colonial nations, right? Like, if you compare Cuba to Haiti, for example, it's pretty clear to see, even though Cuba was, like, has been under, like draconian U.S. sanctions for a long-ass time, it's pretty easy to see that you'd prefer to live in Cuba. Cuba refers to themselves as a country striving for socialism? Yeah. Maybe important context, I'm in Florida, so Cuba is not pretty easy to see here. That's fair. Yeah, I don't really talk to many Cuban Americans about things like this, so I guess that's a fair perspective to have. But for the fact that okay. You've elected Marco Rubio how many times now? Yeah. Yeah. I'm really glad I don't live in Florida. That's just all I have to say about that. I mean, Texas isn't much better, but you know what? Fuck it. Owing to the fact that the individuals who make up the people have different... Okay. And here I'm making a side as to show how, based on reasoning backed by evidence... Okay. Government means the right to make the law and impose it on everyone by force. Without a police force, there is no government. Now, can a society live and progress peacefully for the greater good of all? Can it gradually adapt to ever-changing circumstances if the majority has the right and means to impose its will by force on the recalcitrant minorities? The majority is by definition backward, conservative, enemy of the new, sluggish in thought and deed, and at the same time impulsive, immoderate, suggestible, facile in its enthusiasms and irrational fears. Every new idea stems from one or a few individuals, is accepted, if viable, by a more or less sizable minority, and wins over the majority, if ever, only after it has been superseded by new ideas and new needs, and has already become outdated and rather an obstacle rather than a spur to progress. But do we then want a minority government? Certainly not. If it is unjust and harmful for a majority to oppress minorities and obstruct progress, it is even more unjust and harmful for a minority to oppress the whole population or to impose its ideas by force, which, even if they are good ones, would excite repugnance and opposition because of the very fact of being imposed. I went to a Rubio event when he was trying to get the nomination. He was the nicest of the speakers. He did not get a jerk when I tried to ask a question, like Huckabee, who was a dick and brushed me off as just a college liberal. Yeah. I mean, that sounds about right. If better than Mike Huckabee, it's kind of a low bar. But yeah, I get what you mean by that. And then one must not forget there are all kinds of different minorities. There are minorities of egoists and villains, as there are fanatics who believe themselves to be possessed of the absolute truth, and in perfectly good faith seek to impose on others what they hold to be the only way to salvation, even if it is simple silliness. There are minorities of reactionaries who seek to turn back the clock and are divided as to the path and limits of reaction. And there are revolutionary minorities also divided on the means and ends of revolution and the direction that social progress should take. Which minority should take over? This is a matter of brute force and capacity for intrigue, and the odds of success would fall to the most sincere and most devoted to the general good are not favorable. To conquer power, one needs qualities that are not exactly those that are needed to ensure that justice and well-being will triumph in the world. But I shall here continue to give others the benefit of the doubt and assume that a minority came to power which, among those who aspire to government, I considered the best for its ideas and proposals. I want to assume that the socialists came to power and would add also the anarchists if I am not prevented by a contradiction in terms. This would be the worst of all. Yes, to win power, whether legally or illegally, one needs to have left by the roadside a large part of one's ideological baggage and to have got rid of all one's moral scruples, and then once in power, the big problem is how to stay there. One needs to create a joint interest in the new state of affairs and attach to those in government a new privileged class, and suppressing any kind of opposition by all possible means. Perhaps in the new national interest, but always with freedom-destructive results. An established government founded on the passive consensus of the majority and strong in numbers and tradition and the sentiment, sometimes sincere, of being in the right, can leave some space to liberty, is at least so long as the privileged classes do not feel threatened. A new government which relies for support only on an often slender minority is obliged through necessity to be tyrannical. One need only think what the socialists and communists did when they came to power, either betraying their principles or comrades or by flying colors in the name of socialism and communism. This is why we are neither for majority nor minority government, neither for democracy nor dictatorship, or for the abolishment. We are for anarchy. Okay, I like this writing, but and I think that it's an article, but I think that the point of in order to seize power, you have to, in a minority ruled government, you have to impose measures to sustain those powers, no matter how noble your goals are, is a good one. But this, again, I was hoping this would actually get into the what specifically Malatest is in favor of, which, oh well. I really like this one right now. Yeah, let me actually, I'm gonna save this one. Boop. Where would this go? You connect it with some real world stuff like Citizens United and show how capitalism corrupts and contradicts democracy, and connect this later part in the passage with something like the seesawing rights of gay folks in the US, it might help bring it home a bit. Yeah, and I think I'm looking for the wrong keyword, because a lot of ooh, 3 has followed. Thank you so much. Ooh, 3. Hi, how are you doing? Ooh, 3. I'm gonna keep saying it like that. Um. Oh, I typed that in wrong. Bullet points. So what do we want to take away from this? We want to take away that good. How about you? I'm doing all right. I'm doing some research on socialist democratic organizations, specifically from like an anarchist perspective, just because I happen to be an anarchist and I'm going to have to debate someone about this subject. So I figured it's a good idea to have like some sort of backing for what I think, right? Debate topic is focused more on workplace democracy, right, rather than state level democracy. So that wasn't necessarily specified. Workplace democracy was something that Bastiat specifically said that he wanted to talk about. But more broadly, he wanted to speak on. Here, let me see if I can pull it up. I'm not gonna leak my DMs, but I'm gonna pull it up. What he specifically said is he's interested in the question of whether you can actually do socialism democratically. And he suggested democracy in the workplace as a starting point. So like when he says actually do socialism democratically, I'm thinking like how do we democratically transition to socialism, which I'm I'm more of like a into approaching things from like a revolutionary perspective, where we build separate democratic institutions that supplant the role for state organization, rather than through implementing socialism through the democratic mechanisms of the state specifically, which I think most leftists would or most anarchists at least would agree with that. Is it possible to? Is it actually possible to do capitalism democratically? Turn that question around. Yeah. Government is okay. Let me. Can I do a bulleted list in Google Sheets in like a cell? I don't think I can. I'd be really surprised if I could. Oh well. Because it seems like just really bad data formatting. Bullet points. Strict majority rule. Rule of minority requires that party to act unethically to maintain power. That's, I think, a good enough bullet point. But yeah, turning around that question is gonna be a good thing. And yeah, I do want to have not only the tools to like defend, and this is maybe something I'll think of off stream, is like not just the tools that I need to defend my own perspective, but like the specific line of questioning I'd use to attack the idea of capitalism being compatible with democracy is something else that I'm going to need to work on. And turning that question around is going to be part of that for sure. Okie dokie. What's next? This FAQ is probably going to have something in it, right? What is anarchism? What does anarchy mean? What does anarchism mean? Are anarchists socialists? Where does anarchy? Okay. What does anarchism stand for? This is probably going to do anarchists support terrorism? This is probably going to have like some form of like organization. This is like an FAQ, so I'd probably want to look for like additional sources. Individuals anarchists. Tucker. Okay. Liberty is essential for the full flowering of human intelligence, creativity, and dignity. To be dominated by another is to be denied the chance to think and act for oneself, which is the only way to grow and develop one's individuality. Domination also stifles innovation and personal responsibility, leading to conformity and mediocrity. Thus, a society that maximizes the growth of individuality will necessarily be based on voluntary association, not coercion and authority. Terrorism is a tactic, at least as I understand it. Not a tactic that I would want to discuss on twitch.tv. let's leave it there. And make the argument that democracy can exist within capitalism, but with the understanding that it will be highly flawed and susceptible to special interest, which prevents it from being equitable. Yeah. That's true, and that's something that like whatever way I frame the conversation, I would have to address like specifically bring up how capitalism fails, like a democracy within capitalism fails to actually meet the moral justification for democracy that most liberals believe in, right? Holy shit, I just woke up from a 5-hour nap. Hey bud, how you doing, Josh? I just have to check something real quick. Alrighty. Honestly, I want to go back to bed. Go back to bed then, dude. Solidarity means mutual aid, working voluntarily and cooperatively with others, share the same goals and interests. Without liberty and equality, society becomes a pyramid of competing classes based on the domination of the lower by the higher strata. Such a society, as we know from our own, its dominate or be dominated, dog eat dog, and everyone for themselves. Thus, rugged individualism is promoted at the expense of community feeling, with those on the bottom resenting those above them, and those on top fearing those below them. Under such conditions, there can be no society-wide solidarity, but only a partial form of solidarity within classes whose interests are opposed, which weakens society as a whole. Okay, what is the essence of anarchism? Anarchists. I'm looking for like more nuts and bolts shit, and I'm not finding it here. Probably much to read on stream. I look at Thomas Paine's pamphlet Agrarian Justice for some good arguments by a founding father. Oh, let me make sure I have the Bookchin recommendation from Yoman written down. Ecology of Freedom. Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure I have all of these sources written down. If I have to check them off stream, that's fine. But even Wealth of Nations undermines the assumption of capitalism to an extent. Imagine reading. Yeah, well, I haven't read much of Wealth of Nations, but I have read like some portions of it that are, well, not like leftist, are at the very least very counterintuitive to how a lot of capitalists see the world today. Okay. Yeah, this one may be good for like quote mining, but for like actual theory, I don't know how. I don't know if I really want to stick up for Thomas Paine, or Anyway, next. I never want to read Adam Smith, Plato, or Paine again. I know that I'm going to have to do next year if I get accepted. Yeah. That's very understandable. Liberty is a precondition. Okay. Direct action. Are anarchists in favor of organization? Let's see. This is probably. Without association, a truly human life is impossible. Liberty cannot exist without society and organization. Paine was a pretty great dude. Don't let the ANCAPs fool you by appropriating him. Yeah, I mean, I can see that from some of Paine's writings, but I don't know. I'd rather not have. I don't like relying on like the people who aren't leftists to make leftist arguments, if that makes sense. Like it just seems to me that there's although like in this particular instance, like having like a quote from Thomas Paine saying like, hey, this thing I'm saying this person thought that you respect thinks it as well. But there are some things Thomas Paine wrote that I think are like you said, like at least a pretty great dude. As far as organization goes, anarchists think that far from creating authority, it is the only cure for it and the only means whereby each of us get used to taking an active and conscious part in collective work and cease being passive instruments in the hands of leaders. Anarchists are. Paine was progressive in the context of the day, but like we took earlier, there's a need for understanding their context in the period, but that needs to be discussed when appropriate. Yeah. Thus, anarchists are well aware of the need to organize and structure. Okay, maybe this is a good source. I'm gonna add this to the list. Although the fact there's a page 86 here makes me want to look at this off stream. I don't know how much like mining through that I'm gonna have to find to get what I want. Thus, anarchists are well aware of the need to organize in a structured and open manner. Carol Ehrlich points out, while anarchists aren't opposed to structure and simply want to abolish hierarchical structure, they're almost always stereotyped as wanting no structure at all. This is not the case for organizations that would build an accountability diffusion of power among the maximum number of persons. Task rotation and skill sharing, part of information and resources are based on the good social anarchist principles of organization. I want to add this to the thing as well because this potentially has more info. This FAQ is not something I would be like citing in this debate. This is just a way for me to find more sources. The fact that anarchists are in favor of organization may seem strange at first, but is understandable. Fears that organization can only be totalitarian or democratic, and those who disbelieve in government must by that token disbelieve in organization at all. That's not so. Because we live in a society in which virtually all forms of organization are authoritarian, this makes them appear to be... It's like Wikipedia, use it for sources, not as a source. Yeah. What about this? This seems to be addressing the source. I'm going to specifically cite the page number here too. This is just going to be a big reading list of things, and hopefully I'll read some of them. He's straight living in a society. In other words, because we live in a society in which all forms of organization are authoritarian, this makes them appear to be the only kind possible. What is usually not recognized is that this mode of organization is historically conditioned, arising within a specific kind of society, one whose motive principles are domination and exploitation. According to archaeologists and anthropologists, this kind of society has only existed for about 5,000 years, having appeared within the first primitive states based on conquest and slavery, in which the labor of slaves created a surplus which supported a ruling class. We gay live in a society. Prior to that time, for hundreds of thousands of years, human and proto-human societies were what Murray Bookchin calls organic, that is, based on cooperative forms of economic activity involving mutual aid, free access to productive resources, and a sharing of the products of communal labor according to need. Although such societies probably had status rankings based on age, there were no hierarchies in the sense of institutionalized dominant-subordination relations, enforced by coercive sanctions and resulting in class stratification involving the economic exploitation of one class by another. See Murray Bookchin, The Ecology of Freedom. Right here. It must be emphasized, however, that anarchists do not advocate going back to the Stone Age. We merely note that since the hierarchical authoritarian mode of organization is a relatively recent development in the course of human social evolution, there's no reason to suppose it is somehow fated to be permanent. We do not think that human beings are genetically programmed for authoritarian, competitive, and aggressive behavior, as there is no credible evidence to support this claim. On the contrary, such behavior is socially conditioned or learned, and as such can be unlearned. The Ashley Montagu, The Nature of Human Aggression. This is interesting to me. I don't know if... Yeah, this is... Because almost every, like, debate with, like, a liberal or someone who's, like, capitalist of any flavor, a lot of it boils down to human nature, and... like, arguments against human nature are important to have a good understanding of. We're not fatalists or genetic determinists, but believe in free will, which means that people can change the way they do things, including the way they organize society. There's no doubt that society needs to be better organized, because presently most of its wealth, which is produced by the majority, and power gets distributed to a small elite minority at the top of the social pyramid, causing deprivation and suffering for the rest, particularly for those at the bottom. Yet because this elite controls the means of coercion through its control of the state, oh, shit, I forgot to consider human nature. Yeah. True, in my experience, when the walls of liberalism break down, people immediately fall into doing anarchism, and it's super rad to watch. Yeah, I have seen, like, I can't think of some examples of things happening. When you say, like, the walls of liberalism break down, the first thing I imagine is, like, I don't know, some sort of natural disaster, which is not super fun to watch, but you know what? Hey, even the great liberal theoretician Francis Fukuyama, whose leg many of them cling to, contradicts their arguments, detailing how states form from classless societies as a result of complex kinship systems and a need for defense from outside groups. Yeah. Yeah, it's there's a lot of human nature shit that's... Sorry, I'm like exhausted right now. I got 4 hours of sleep last night. But yeah, the idea of like there being some sort of like necessity for there being some sort of like human hierarchy where human nature dictates that we only will act in certain ways that are necessary for society to function if there is some sort of hierarchy at play. Like if there's even one example of a society that's not organized along those lines, then it's not really human nature, is it? Unless you can prove that those people are not human, which is the goal of like a lot of like colonialist measures to completely strip indigenous people of any non-hierarchical aspects of their culture, right? We can't have that being like a thing that people practice, let alone remember, or remember, let alone practice. So there were like, especially in the US, which is what I'm most familiar with, there were like very active attempts to like completely strip any colonized people from their identity completely, in an effort to make sure that non-hierarchical organization, like the knowledge of that, was suppressed. Well, the part where people do anarchism is fun to watch. While people struggle when their houses are destroyed by a tornado. Yeah, same here. Low blood sugar woke me up. Yeah, I've got a lot of issues sleeping, mostly stemming from like PTSD from an accident that I had. So it's right now I'm a little bit out of it, but you know what? We'll keep going. Hopefully, I've got like an hour left before I gotta head out of here. But hopefully, we can get something productive done in that hour. We are not fatalists or genetic determinists, but we believe in free will, which means that people can change the way they do things, including the way they organize society. That sucks, and I hope that things get better for you. Yeah, I mean, I hope they do too. Thank you, I appreciate that. There's no doubt that society needs to become better organized, because presently most of its wealth, which is produced by the majority in power, gets distributed to a small elite minority at the top of the social pyramid, causing deprivation and suffering for the rest, particularly for those at the bottom. Alright. Yeah, because this elite controls the mean of coercion through its control of the state, it is able to suppress the majority and ignore its suffering. A phenomenon that occurs on a smaller scale within all hierarchies. Little wonder then that people within authoritarian and centralized structures come to hate them as a denial of their freedom. As Alexander Berkman puts it, anyone who tells you anarchists don't believe in organization is talking nonsense. Organization is everything, and everything is organization. The whole of life is organization, conscious or unconscious. But there is organization and organization. Capitalist society is so badly organized that its various members suffer. Just as when you have a pain in some part of you, your whole body aches and you are ill. Not a single member of the organization or union may with impunity be discriminated against, suppressed, or ignored. To do so would be the same as to ignore an aching tooth. You'd be sick all over. For these reasons, anarchists reject authoritarian forms of organization and instead support associations based on free agreement. Free agreement is important because, in Berkman's words, only when each is free and independent unit cooperating with others from his own choice because of mutual interest can the world work successfully and become powerful. Anarchist stress, okay, has to be complemented by direct democracy, or as it is usually called by anarchists, self-management, within the association itself. Otherwise, freedom becomes, that should probably be plural, a little more than picking masters. You made me yawn, you ass. Anarchist organization is based on a massive decentralization of power back into the hands of the people, i.e. those who are directly affected by the decisions being made. Quote Proudhon. Unless democracy is a fraud and the sovereignty of the people is a joke, it must be admitted that each citizen in the sphere of his or her industry, each municipal, district, or provincial council within its own territory should act directly and by itself in administering the interests, which includes should exercise full sovereignty in relation to them, right? Okay. It also implies a need for federalism to coordinate joint interests. For anarchism, federalism is a natural complement to self-management. With the abolition of state, society can and must organize itself in a different fashion, but not from top to bottom. The future social organization must be made solely from the bottom upwards by the free association or federation of workers, firstly in their unions, then in the communes, regions, nations, and finally in a great federation, international and universal. Then alone will be realized a true and life-giving order of freedom and the common good, that order which, far from denying, on the contrary, affirms and brings into harmony the interests of the individual and society. Damn, son, lose some weight. What do they call you? Big fat? Nice. Nice. Good one. Therefore, anarchist organization is based on direct democracy, federalism. These are the expression and environment of liberty. Direct or participatory democracy is essential because liberty and equality imply the need for forums. Shit, man, it's over now. I know, I just got owned so bad. Democracy is essential because liberty and equality imply the need for forums within which people can. I wish there was a citation on how this actually works. Can I like search for like direct democracy? Here, let's do this. This is what democracy looks like. I think that a political doctrine and system that was propagated. By the bourgeoisie and their rise to power that is promoted worldwide by the Western ruling class, and that's only existed in its so-called pure form on the backs of slaves, would at least be suspect in the eyes of those who oppose the present social order. But such is not the case. The new movement of opposition to the global order that is said to have been born on January 1st, 1994, the Zapatista Uprising, and had its coming out party in Seattle at the demonstration against the World Trade Organization, and it's taken that slogan, "This is what democracy looks like," and that without a hint of irony. But this is fitting for a movement which looks to the EZLN, that revolutionary army which made such radical demands as a more democratic Mexican government and more participation by the indigenous people of Chiapas in the democratic process of that government, founding inspiration. Reform movement. Okay, I just want to hear about like direct democracy. I understand that the current democratic system. Hold on. Lack of analysis with the consequent unrelated but my dog has moved to being behind me on the couch. He's trying to clean my shirt. Oh no. Or oh yes, I don't know how that. I don't particularly like dogs, so that's a no for me. But you know what? If that's a no yes for you, that's also valid. It's important to examine this political doctrine and system both as an ideal and social system. The origins of democracy go back to the ancient Greek city-states. They're considered direct democracies opposed to present representative democracies, and idealized by such libertarian ideologies as ideologues as Murray Bookchin. Democracy is said to be governed by the people, but people in this case mean citizens, not individual human beings. Yeah, that's true. This is true. This is like interesting, and this is like critique that's worth reading. How long is this? It's both. What's wrong with you? Don't like dogs? All right, let's keep reading this. I have a feeling I'm gonna have some disagreements with this. Who are the authors? I should like actually look for who this is. I should also spell right. Who is this person? I just want to see what these people's perspective is. I'm certain. Okay. Spelling right is bourgeoisie. Yeah, let me quotation mark. I'm not finding anything about this person. I think that might be the pen name of someone who does not want to be made known, just basing on how nothing. Yeah, yeah, no, that's what I'm finding as well. And we also have an anonymous writer. So we have people who are anonymous in this, which is fine. I'm just trying to find like the bylines of this anonymous. Who's this? Yeah, this is in French, so I don't think I'm gonna be able to. Here we go. Um, you'll DM it to me on Discord. I'll see if there's anything for you in the French doc. I mean, I'm really just trying to look for like the bylines of these people to see what perspective they're coming at this from. But yeah, it was close this real quick. What if they're ANCAPs? I don't think they're ANCAPs. It was Dominique Missien. Here, I'll DM it to you real quick. Her name. ANCAPs are just weird. I wouldn't say they're just weird. Okay. A lack of analysis for the consequent lack of understanding of what democracy actually is lies behind this acceptance among so-called radicals of the political system promoted by the ruling class. Therefore, it is important to examine this political doctrine and system both as an ideal and social system. The only other example given of direct democracy is the town meetings of New England. That's not... I don't think that's the only other example given about this. What is forgotten in this example is that the town meetings are not autonomous assemblies. They exist in the context of the representative systems of the county, state, and federal governments, cannot override any laws passed by the representative bodies of the higher governing institutions. Furthermore, the decisions made in these meetings are not directly carried out by those who make them. Rather, they are delegated to various elected or hired officials who constitute the town government. Thus, these town meetings can no more be called direct democracy than neighborhood watch programs, which have to embrace vigilantism and lynching to be true direct democracy. Yeah, they're exceptionally weird. As such, from its inception, it has prescribed limits for the freedom of individuals. In Kapistan. Okay, I think I've read that. Direct democracy that incorporates all the people who make up society as a utopian ideal. This is something I don't know. This depends on how you frame direct democracy, right? So if you're framing direct democracy as, and the only two examples you're using are the ancient Greek city-states and town hall assemblies in New England, then yeah, neither of those two things are direct democracies. But I don't think that proves that a direct democracy that incorporates all of the people who make up a society is utopian, especially when you say when your scope is all of the people who make up a society, which can be as broad as like I don't think it's realistically, I don't think we can have 300 million people in the United States all be part of one single direct democracy, right? Which is why we argue direct democracy would have to come alongside like decentralization. I was shooting heroin and reading The Fountainhead in the front seat of my privately owned police cruiser when a call came in. I put a quarter in the radio to activate it. Keep in mind that democracy is a social and political system, a form of government. As such, from its inception, it has prescribed... I want to see where this is going, though, before I, like... But I do have criticisms about some of how this is written. As such, from its inception, it has prescribed limits for the freedom of individuals, the primary limit being the good of all, that is, the good of the social system. Thus, what one decides within a democratic system, no matter how direct it is not how to freely create one's life and one's relationship as they see fit, but rather how to maintain the social system and exercise one's rights and roles within it. These decisions are not those of individuals, but of the group as a whole. Whether the decision-making process is by majority, by unanimous consensus, or through elected representatives, and the individual's life is subject to these decisions. In other words, she is ruled by the democratic system, is life determined by its needs. So for those of us who consider self-determination, the freedom of each individual to create her life as he sees fit, relationship with whoever and whatever she chooses, democracy, even direct democracy, is useless or even detrimental to our movement towards this freedom. But the ideal of democracy examined above and the democracy we confront in our daily lives are two different things. The latter is the political system that the bourgeoisie put in place when they came to power after the overthrow of the feudal aristocracy. There are several reasons why the new ruling class chose to wed democracy to the representative system. It certainly is not possible to practice direct democracy on the scale of the nation-state, the other new institution that at the rise of capitalism brought into being. But more significant to the new rulers who came into power with the bourgeoisie revolutions was the fact that representative democracy allows the active and voluntary participation of the exploited classes in their own exploitation and domination, while keeping real political power in the hands of the capitalist class who can afford to run for office or pay others who will support their interests to do so. And I'm starting to say the representative system, the feudal origins of political representation, the reasons behind the bourgeoisie marriage between this and the democratic system are exposed. My own essay, A Desolate Landscape, points out the reality that the repressive police state has arisen in the United States over the past several years, has been developing through democratic processes, a social consensus produced by media-induced fear. To oppose this police state in the name of democracy is therefore an absurdity. It must be opposed as a part of our opposition to the democratic and all other forms of state. Well, yeah, so this is not an argument against, like... This is an argument against the implementation of democracy within, like, a bourgeois state government. And more specifically, any form of state government. But, like, that's not... this doesn't necessarily... I'm wondering if this is a criticism of democracy as I see it, where it's one mode of social organization within a non-state like association. Your hair right now? When did you join the Beatles? I need a haircut. That's one of the most important steps for debating this guy is going to be getting my haircut. Hopefully tomorrow. To oppose this police state in the name of democracy is therefore an absurdity. It must be opposed as a part of our... Okay. The Lesser Evil by Dominic Messiaen exposes how the logic that is so basic to a democratic system, the logic of compromise and negotiation, mediocrity and making do, comes to permeate every aspect of life to the point where dreams and desires fade, passion disappears. What passion can one feel for a lesser evil, and revolution loses all meaning. This domination over all of life is the purpose of the participatory social system the bourgeoisie impose. This permeation into every aspect of life makes a democratic order the most successful totalitarian social system to ever exist. And who is it? Adonide compares classical dictatorship to the totalitarianism of the democratic system, where everyone can excuse himself because she is only a cog in this vast social machine, and individual responsibility seems to disappear. at present. So this is specifically talking about democracy as it's applied to. I don't think using the term democracy to address like this specific like bourgeois liberal democracy that all of these articles seem to be criticizing is like productive or fair language. But I'm open to criticism. If I'm missing something obvious and completely misinterpreting what this is actually saying, please someone let me know. Seem to just be hype man duty. They all just seem okay to get people to buy a book. Yeah. A representative system is a political expedient by means of which the bourgeois attempts to realize the principle of popular sovereignty without renouncing its privileges ruling class. The idea of popular sovereignty in its modern sense has been the dominant political conception since the revolutions of the 18th century. For that, sovereignty resided in the monarch and the noble and theocratic classes, which held and exercised it through right of conquest, through hereditary right, and by virtue of mystical divine investiture. In which case of virtue by brute force. The representative system isn't the final analysis contrivance conceived. Okay. Is Kropotkin writing that representative government is a system elaborated by the bourgeois classes to gain earthly respect from the monarchic system? That's true. Or that's true that Kropotkin wrote that. Speaking of ANCAPs being exceptionally weird, this is also some of the funniest shit I've ever read. I remember that. I do remember that thread. Oh man. I think that thread is how I found Complete Anarchy. By supporting a parliamentary government. Yeah, this person is using a different definition of democracy than I. These people are all writing, and it seems like their writings have like representative or non-inclusive direct democracy as, or like a liberal democracy as interchangeable with what I would call like a direct democratic mode of organization. So I don't know if this is making decisions amongst assemblies. This is what we need. I don't know why I didn't read this earlier. I had this tab open for like 20 minutes. The key problem in building a horizontal, non-hierarchical social order based on participatory, direct democracy has never been how to do this on the local level in one town meeting, workers' council, or village assembly, but how to make decisions across such assemblies. The idea of yelling you're violating the NAP as you're getting thrown out of a building for being fascist is fucking hilarious. Yeah. Direct democracy is frequently dismissed precisely because people believe that it cannot work in larger territories. I don't believe this is true, but it's true that it never yet been done, as far as I know. This is the challenge that we face. Direct decision-making procedures are thus not secondary matters, not at all. This is what I've been looking for this whole fucking time, Jesus. Maybe if I was better at researching, I would have found this earlier. Until we solve the problem of directly democratic decision-making across territories, we cannot establish a free society. It's as stark as that. What are our options? First, let's review how it is done presently in the capitalist so-called representative democracies. Simple individual votes are tallied across the state to elect representatives who then make the decisions. Most everyone realizes now, of course, that this is a sham and has nothing to do with real democracy. It is a device ruling classes have used to stay in power. The rich are able, by and large, to control who runs for office and what they do after taking office. Besides, the ruling class is making all the big decisions behind the scenes in order to perpetuate capitalism. Even parliaments... Who wrote this one, by the way? James Herod. Brief Critique of Anarcho-Syndicalism. Let me Google who this is. I love this. I love this knowledge panel summary. I got a hair in my mouth. Ugh. James Herod joined the struggle against capitalist politicians and priests, or to use the abstractions capital, state, and God, during the social upheavals of 1968 and has remained in it ever since. Okay, maybe this is something we need to... This seems, Alright. What are our options? First, let's review how it is done presently in the Okay. In parliaments controlled by years by a majority of socialists have not been able to unseat the capitalist ruling classes. What if there were no ruling class, but just our popular assemblies in our neighborhood and workplaces? What then? Well, we could continue using the same procedure that bourgeois democracies did and elect representatives by tallying individual votes across the land. Marx and Engels believe that if there were no ruling class, there would be no problem with representatives because they would not be serving the interests of the ruling class but those of the working class. A century and a half later, we now know this is not the case. A decision-making elite very rapidly turns into a bureaucracy, which rapidly turns into a new ruling class. There's another way to select representatives, however, other than picking them through general elections. Each assembly could choose a representative, and the custom among radicals has been to call them delegates, and more recently spokespersons, and these delegates to regional assemblies to make decisions. But here is where we start running into confusion, ambiguity, and disagreement. Traditionally, anarchists have justified relinquishing their decision-making power to delegates with the concepts of mandate and recall. I examined these notions in my book, Getting Free. I think I'll just reprint the relevant paragraphs here. I like this guy. Anarchists have long deluded themselves with the idea of federation. They have solved the thorny problem of how they can have both direct democracy and large-scale organization at the same time. The pat formula they ritualistically repeat. Federated the municipal, regional, national, and international levels. It's a grand illusion. Federation creates a hierarchy by using delegates to form smaller and smaller decision-making units. Conservative Party just texted me if they can count on my vote in the upcoming election. What did you text back? They say yes and throw off their polling data? Is it like a human or a robot that's texting you right now? Make it more palatable, this idea is garnished with three other illusions: mandated delegates, instant recall, and separation of policymaking from administration. I believe all three ideas are flawed and incompatible with direct democracy and hence with anarchism, self-government, and autonomy. The notion of a mandated delegate is a mirage because as soon as a meeting convenes, everything is open. The discussion of the issues redefines those issues. Sometimes a change of only one word in a proposal can completely alter the proposal's meaning and impact. There's no way delegates can avoid exercising their own judgment on the issues once a discussion gets underway, no matter how detailed their instructions ahead of time. So the idea that mandated delegates can preserve the decision-making power of the neighborhood assembly is an illusion. In short, I do not believe that delegates can be mandated. The idea of instant recall is also an illusion. For recall to work, the people back home would have to follow the discussion as closely as if they were there themselves. They would have to have detailed current knowledge of the issues as they were unfolding in debates among delegates. Even if everyone back home were watching the conference live on television, an impossibility in order to exercise recall. Probably a robot. In 2015-2016, I got probably 1,000 texts from the Bernie campaign. It was very annoying, but probably effective for getting people to vote in the primary. Yeah, I got about 1,000 texts as well. One thing to consider is if you respond yes to this robot, are you going to continue receiving text messages? That's something to consider, Postbud. Or to exercise recall, they would have to convene themselves in their neighborhood assemblies and debate whether or not a delegate had deviated from the mandate far enough to warrant recall. If they're going to do this, if they have this kind of intimate knowledge of the issues and this kind of communication system, they might as well be making the decisions themselves directly without bothering to go through the hassle of setting up a conference of delegates. A moment's reflection shows that the whole idea of recall is fallacious, but has been repeated uncritically for decades by radicals. Similarly, the idea of separation between policymaking and administration doesn't make sense. Anyone who's worked on a project knows that all kinds of decisions have been made constantly. I mean, the most mundane decision yet have profound policy implications. This is true. But unless a decision happens to come under scrutiny and is discussed and aired, it may not be clear what its policy implications are. In other words, it's next to impossible to separate purely administrative decisions from policy decisions, because almost any so-called administrative decisions may be shown to have policy implications. The distinction is a false one. It is another illusion, a way of convincing ourselves that we still have a project based on direct democracy when we do not. These objections are valid, I believe, and confirm our need to stick to direct democracy and never relinquish decision-making power to delegates. Others continue to object, however, saying this principle of not relinquishing the decision-making should not be elevated like this. They insist that they have the right to hand over this power to delegates if they want to, and their group does want to. They say that they trust their delegates to make the right decisions, ones that the group itself would make, because the delegate knows the group and will act in its best interests. First of all, it's simply not true that delegates can always know what their constituents want on every issue. Opinions change, disagreements emerge almost inevitably, but more generally, here's my answer to this line of argument. The main reason for wanting to avoid delegating decision-making power to representatives is not that people thereby the people thereby hand over their power to others and create a decision-making elite, although this is bad enough. It is not that they're thereby no longer autonomous individuals, for there is no such thing. Rather, it is that they bar themselves by this action from participating in the discussion of the issues. They forfeit their natures as thinking persons and instead hand over this function to others. Others suggest that maybe rotation would solve the problem. We could still relinquish decision-making to delegates, but then rotate the delegates frequently, so no decision-making elite could emerge. It's true that elite formation could thus people out, but it still means we'd be giving up our decision-making power, handing it over to others. Even though it is held only temporarily by any one person, it's still permanently gone from us. Rotation is a good strategy for many kinds of tasks. Any project is divided into tasks, and in many cases it is useful to rotate these tasks so everyone can learn everything. That is, everyone can more or less become competent in the whole operation. General decision-making in assemblies is a different category, however. It is a task of a different kind. Perhaps a clarification would be useful at this point. Direct democracy does not mean that every decision about everything is taken by everyone. That's clearly impossible. The very idea is absurd. Decisions over a huge area of life, like most projects, particularly jobs or household, for example, will be made by those directly involved. Only decisions of general significance need to be made by general assemblies. But the general assemblies will decide what these matters are and what should concern them and what not. A better distinction, therefore, than policy/administrative is whether something is a matter that needs to be decided by the whole community, or is a matter that can be left to subgroups. Any social order will have division of labor, with specialized tasks, where decision-making is best left to those who are actually doing the task. The mistake is to think that decision-making itself is a specialized task, for which we elect persons with specialized skill to carry it out. This is a grave error and leads inevitably to a hierarchical society. This is interesting. This is something I've sort of thought about, but didn't really have the framework to actually analyze in the way it's being done here. Anyway, this is not the place to fully argue the case for direct democracy. I should at least mention one salient fact, however. We can only defeat capitalists by taking decision-making away from them and relocating it in our own directly democratic assemblies. But for the time being, let me just assume that we are agreed that we want direct democracy. How do we get it? As mentioned above, the problem is how to make decisions amongst groups, assemblies, councils, in a way that is compatible with direct democracy. That is, how can we make decisions across territories without using delegates or electing representatives? This is a problem that has not yet been solved, historically speaking, that is in actual social practice. There are two ways we could avoid electing representatives altogether. The Conservative Party of Canada is known for their less than savory methods when it comes to elections. It would in no way surprise me that they would use illicitly received lists or had people act on their behalf without the party having any accountability. Yikes. We could discuss the issues in our assemblies, but then tally individual votes across assemblies. This is a big improvement over parliamentary democracy and the election of representatives, i.e. decision makers. And then in this practice, people are voting on the actual issues, and furthermore, personally involved in the face-to-face discussion and debate, with the votes taken right there in the assembly, but tallied across assemblies. This avoids the practice of polling isolated individuals who have not necessarily benefited from such discussion. This procedure is compatible with direct democracy and might be used in emergencies, provided a proposal can be floated, which can be voted up or down, and getting such proposals is not as easy as it might seem. An emergency situation would be one in which there is not time enough to go through the normal consensus process. Some definition of emergency will be needed, obviously, otherwise this procedure might tend to be used in situations where it need not be, thus short-circuiting consensus decision-making. The second way to avoid electing representatives involves a back-and-forth negotiating process that might be formulated as follows. Proposals that involve two or more assemblies will first be discussed and decided upon in the local assembly using the consensus process. Then negotiators from each assembly involved will confer to work out differences and prepare a general agreement, which will then be returned for ratification by local assemblies. This back-and-forth process will continue until all assemblies involved are satisfied with the decision. Key concept here is ratification. Decision-making is kept firmly on the local level. Any decisions about matters outside the local area, say on a regional level, must be based on ratification by the local assemblies, and this can only be accomplished through a process of negotiation. There is no other way without reverting to a simple majority rule and the tallying of votes by individuals, thus avoiding the consensus process. This may take time, but what's the rush? We must simply recognize that this is how it's done. This is the time we need and the steps we need to go through to make directly democratic decisions. But there will undoubtedly be those who get impatient with this process as we get on with the job. What job is it that we were getting on with? There were people like this in the New Left who got frustrated and impatient with all the time we were devoting to getting into egalitarian relations within our own projects and groups. They wanted to get on with the job of making the revolution, I presume. This is why the New Left gave birth to the idea of prefigurative politics, wherein our current practices, procedures, and behaviors must resemble those that we want in our future society we are trying to bring into being. Similarly with decision-making, we need to invent now the practices we will need later in a world full of democratic, autonomous neighborhoods. We cannot learn how to make decisions across groups, assemblies, territories, based on direct democracy. We've got nothing, absolutely nothing, and may as well forget about establishing a self-managed society. This is a hurdle we must get over before we can create a free society. In light of the above decision, it might be useful. Case study. Oh my god. James Harrod is about to make me nut. Thank you. Thank you, James Harrod, for this blessed nut. In Oaxaca, Mexico, Oaxacans established a popular assembly of the peoples of Oaxaca and Oaxaca City. They also established 40 other popular assemblies in smaller towns scattered around the state. I don't know much about the 40 local town assemblies, but as far as I do know, they made no attempt to establish a network using the direct democratic decision-making procedure outlined above. I do not read Spanish, but I have followed the English language reports quite closely, so I have some knowledge of the popular assembly in Oaxaca City. It was composed of delegates, roughly 180 of them, but this number undoubtedly varied from meeting to meeting. The delegates were sent by labor unions, the teachers' unions, various NGOs, civic organizations, the popular assemblies from smaller towns, various neighborhoods, town councils, scattered individuals, and so forth. Couldn't join voice, just say I nut and leave. This is an unjust hierarchy. That's what the Sirius channel exists for. Alright. Hawkins established. Okay. The assembly, therefore, was sort of modified parliamentary democracy. It was not based on direct democracy. It's true this way of selecting delegates is far superior to selecting them through general statewide elections, which the rich can easily control. It's also true that this was a way of bypassing the existing power structure based on the established political parties. Yet many, perhaps most of the organizations who sent delegates to the Popular Assembly are not themselves organized eternally on the basis of direct democracy, but are rather traditional hierarchical organizations. So basically, they were sending leaders to the Popular Assembly. But at least these delegates were leaders of their local groups and not leaders imposed from above, except perhaps in some of the national unions. This popular assembly was definitely set up, though, to be a statewide decision-making body. And indeed, the assembly before too long started passing resolutions which were binding on the entire state. It took on the functions of a legislative body. Also, the popular assembly used traditional majority rule just as a matter of course, with votes being counted individually. In addition, there was only the one popular assembly in the whole city of Oaxaca, which has a population of 250,000 out of 3.3 million statewide. It was meant to be an assembly for Oaxaca City itself. Its delegates came from all over the state. There was at least one element of direct democracy present that I know of. Section 22 of the Teachers Union practiced what they called consulting with the base. Decisions taken by the popular assembly had to be ratified by the entire membership of the Teachers Union. I don't know if other organizations represented in the assembly use this procedure. My impression is that they didn't. And I don't know how often the delegates from Section 22 had to consult or over what types of decisions. Was it only for the really big decisions or more or less for everything? My impression is that it was only for the really big decisions, like whether to end the strike or not. For comparative purposes, we might take a quick look at the neighborhood council system in El Alto, Bolivia. This is one of the most advanced cities on the earth in terms of local control and grassroots organization with elements of direct democracy. The city of 800,000 is organized into 600 neighborhood councils. The councils basically run the city. The average membership in a council is 200, but these 200 participants usually represent the entire neighborhood. They come from the heads of families, unions, trade organizations, and so forth. So the neighborhood councils are not assemblies of the entire neighborhood, which would mean meetings of roughly 1,300 people. They are assemblies of delegates from the neighborhood. Nevertheless, it's a powerful grassroots structure. For citywide decisions, El Alto also relies on delegates, on a central council composed of delegates sent from neighborhood councils. So on a city level, they reverted to federation hierarchy to a modified representative government. In his new book, Consensus, Peter Gelderloos has this to say about federations. Federations contain two tiers of structure, local and central. The local structure consists of a number of autonomous groups, each working within their immediate communities that have decided for various reasons to band together. Central structure manifests as periodic meetings attended by people from each local group within the structure. At these central meetings, people decide matters concerning the entire federation and create strategies of action that each locality can participate in for a broader impact. The federation should never dictate to a locality, but should recognize the autonomy and self-directed community work of each local group as the source of its strength. The contradiction here is glaring. If the central meeting decides matters concerning the entire federation, how is this consistent with the point that the federation should never dictate to a locality? It's not. If decisions taken at the central meetings are not binding on any local groups, there is no point in making them. Local groups are truly autonomous, and why pretend that a regional assembly of delegates has any power over them? In practice, of course, and here's where I think Gelderloos has misrepresented the situation, regional assemblies do assume they are making decisions that are binding on the entire federation. Moreover, local groups send delegates to these regional meetings, also with the understanding that the body can make decisions that are binding on all groups in the federation. That's the whole point of regional assemblies under federation. And to my mind, this is the thing that distinguishes a federation from a network. Federationists have agreed to relinquish decision-making powers to delegates who then go to regional assemblies to make decisions for the whole federation. Network has refused to relinquish decision-making power to delegates, but instead practice direct democratic decision-making across groups, as outlined above. Other criteria sometimes forward to distinguish networks from federations. So it often said that federations have much more specific statements of purpose or platforms and networks. In federations, it is said members are more or less on the same page of more concretely defined politics. They are more homogeneous politically. Networks are thought to be more heterogeneous with vaguer statements of principles. This may have been true so far historically, but I don't think it need be true. I see no reason why a network could hammer out just as specific a statement of political principles as a federation. Why not? It would take some work. But so do such statements when generated by federations. Federations, by starting out with such a detailed statement of belief, simply exclude those who disagree with it. That's why they are more homogeneous politically. A network can do the same thing. People who don't agree with the mapped out politics simply won't become a part of the network. Conversely, a federation could be just as loosely defined and vague as most networks are currently thought to be. Okay. This is really interesting. I like this source. I'm gonna... I should have made this folder earlier. Alrighty. We've done less than I hoped for. I have this reading list. I have to get ready to go to dinner, though. Unfortunately. Try not to show your porno bookmarks. Yeah, those are those are my other browser. Still a great stream. Thank you so much. I honestly feel a little bit self-conscious whenever I'm like reading a whole lot to people, especially like research that I don't necessarily feel super qualified to talk about, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. That actually does make me feel better about like my ability to actually like present these ideas. You share the reading list. Yes. Sorry I didn't get here earlier. That's fine. So these are the things I'll be reading off stream. Hopefully I'll read all of them, but if not, I'll read some of them. This is like an academic article. Latin American social movements and a new left consensus: state and civil society challenges to neoliberal globalization, by Jennifer Disney and Virginia Williams. And then we have Ecology of Freedom by Bookchin, Agrarian Justice by Thomas Paine, Enrico Malatesta, His Life and Ideas, specifically page 86 at something. Socialism, Anarchism, and Feminism, Quiet Rumors, and Anarcho-Feminist Reader. Stuart Christie and Albert Meltzer, The Floodgates of Anarchy, page 122 was the one that specifically had what I was looking for. And Ashley Montagu, The Nature of Human Aggression. Imagine being named Disney in 2019. Yeah, who knows? Alrighty, I'm gonna find someone to raid real quick. Who's online? Let's raid. Let's raid Ed. These are viewers. Alrighty. We're gonna head over, watch some gameplay. Thank you all for stopping by. If you can give me money, I'd appreciate it. If you can't, don't worry. And let's give Ed a boost in viewers, alright? Have fun. Be nice.